Welcome to Aspire Talks, presented by Aspire Speech and Learning Center. In today's episode, Londa Nerland presents on assistive technology in education, a fascinating and quickly changing field that many students can benefit from.
Hi, my name is Londa Nerland. I'm the Assistive Technology Specialist. I have my degree in Speech and Hearing Science, my undergraduate degree from the University of South Florida, and then I did my graduate certificate from the University of Illinois in Chicago in Assistive Technology. So today we're going to talk about assistive technology. And most people, when you think of assistive technology, you think, oh, it's these high-tech devices. But not everything always has to be high-tech. It can be low-tech devices, strategies for part of assistive tech, just a variety of things. It's thinking outside the box sometimes and trying to figure out what might work for a student or for a person in particular. So what is assistive technology? Well, assistive technology is any device, either commercially made, off the shelf, or you can make it yourself, that is used by a person with disability to improve functional capabilities. It does not mean it's hearing devices or surgically implanted, but AT is constantly on a continuum. And on the continuum, where AT falls is either low-tech, mid-tech, or high-tech. And in the low-tech, it's all based on how much training is needed, what kind of electronic device is with it, is battery operated. The more high-tech it is, the more training that's going to go with it, and the more costly it will be. If it's mid-tech, there might be more battery-operated device, but not as much training is needed as you would for a high-tech device. And then you have the low-tech strategies, which might be as simple as a pencil grip, or using a paper graphic organizer. So it can go across that continuum constantly. And not one device might work for every student. It might be several devices ranging across that continuum to meet the task that student needs, and then what environment that student needs to use that particular device. Okay, so an IEP team is required to consider AT for the student. AT can support every person's need, but every person's need does not require the same AT. The idea is that AT is not specific disability driven. So it's person driven and task driven. So we look at what the task is that the student or the person needs to complete and what technology meets that need. So just because so-and-so has, a device for writing, and because they fatigue with writing, this person may fatigue with writing as well. Do they get the same device? Well, it really depends on the student, because this student might fatigue more cognitively because they have dyslexia along with it, not just for the written part of it. And so when we're looking at students, it should be individually based. Okay. So what can AT assist with? What can assistive technology assist you with? It's across a broad range of functional activities that's involved. So there's math that AT can assist with. There's writing, there's reading, organization. I get it seems a lot more these days of doing executive functioning skills. How do you organize our day? Especially when you get into that middle school area, it gets a little harder because you have several classes that you're having to work with. How do we take notes? Writing, fine motor, communication, spelling, all of that stuff. That's just some of the areas that assistive technology can help with. I'm not even touching on ADLs or environmental control units. Within somebody's home, how can AT access their computer or access their window shades, bed, things like that. So there's a number of areas that assistive technology can assist with. So AT is an ongoing process. Our lives are not static. We're not in the same place all the time. The same goes with AT. We look at the student, the environment, the task, and the tools. And it's an ongoing process. And so 1 year, this might work for one student, and then as they move on to the next year, we have different teachers, different environments we have to take into account. And then you also have new technology that comes into play that might better suit them for whatever the task is that we've identified that they need. So it's an ongoing process, and it's a team process. So this student, what are their person-specific disabilities? What are their difficulties? But we also look at what their abilities are. What are they really good at? What are they motivated with? And so we want to take that and we want to use that to help them, meet the needs that are difficult, that are hard for them to do. We also look at the environment. What different environments will the person need to use the technology? I think more, because I'm in the schools so much, we look at so much of, how many environments does the student need to access the computer or access an iPad? We were talking about voice recognition earlier. It may not be suitable in every environment because the classroom's too loud. Same thing with communication. So like right now I'm assessing a student with a speech therapist, and she's in her home, but she's going to be going to preschool. But when she's in bed, she has no way to communicate, so we need to look at a way she can communicate from the bedroom versus, in her wheelchair and then at school. So there's different environments we're having to look at. So some tasks. What kind of task does the person need assistance to become more functional, to be more independent, to be able to access the curriculum that their other peers get to access? What all tasks is involved? And so what we're going to do is I'm breaking down today, like just for reading and writing, communication, and then for executive functioning skills, what are some of the tasks we're looking at when we're looking at those specific things? And then finally, what tools are is needed to help the person complete those identified tasks? And this is all part of the SET framework. I have the Joy's Zavala up there if you wanted to look more detail on the SET framework. But that is the general idea that we use when we're doing an assessment. These are the things that we're looking at as a team, what we should be doing. Okay. So an evaluation is a team approach. So it's not a lone ranger, one person can do it all. When I do an assessment, I usually involve an occupational therapist, psychologist, whatever is pertinent to the need at the time. So as an example, I was going over one for executive functioning skills. And the SLP had done a report, the psychologist had done a report. But what I'm finding is, and I'm picking out things that are in common with these reports is, this person needed visual strategies, but it wasn't being supplied when working for, providing organization throughout their day. And rather than, one of the psychologists at the time had asked me, well, can we just use a smart pen to write it or to do it, to record what's going on, but there was no visual to go with it. So you would be recording, but this person had no way to visually see it. And that's what this person needed. And so it's really good that we have the whole team, because the whole team brings something different to the assessment. And we all look at things a little differently. I left off, I included adaptive PE, physical therapists, a number of specialists up there. There's also vision specialists too. If you have a VI kid that's needing some help or that's on their IEP, then I like to include the VI because I want to make sure that the print is the size that it needs to be. If they're having a copy from a board, what size should it be? And I want to make sure that those accommodations are in place when we're looking at technology to help with that. Same thing for physical therapists, behavior therapists, and sometimes I include the ABA therapists that are at home because I want to get a perspective of what it's like in the home as well, not just always at school because you're going to do homework. So what do we need to account for at home as well? So anyway, the evaluation is a team approach and not just a one person AT should be doing it. So, okay, so technology and the reading area. So we're going to tackle reading first. And approximately 80% of students with learning disabilities have been described as reading disabled, and that's from LD Online. So we look at the environment. And when I'm looking at reading, I'm looking at does the student need to read out loud in a classroom full of kids? Are they doing small group readings? What's the environments that they're having to read in? Can they read their worksheets? Can they read their tests? Can they read, like my son's reading a book right now. Can they read their textbooks? So what all tasks are identified that we need to tackle for reading? So that's the environment. And then again, the tasks. What sort of task will they need to be doing? Reading things from the board. I know sometimes an accommodation that's usually in the IEP is that notes will be given to the student. But if they can't read the notes that are provided or can't read somebody's handwriting, how is it going to be offered the next time? So looking at those tasks. So some low-tech ideas for tools, and this is just a very abbreviated ideas for low-tech. But using highlighter or highlighting tape to highlight important words, concepts, and a variety of colors to teach the main ideas and new vocabulary. I also use what's called the Easy Reader to assist students who follow along with comprehension. So I have them follow along using the Easy Reader. I know sometimes students just use their finger. So these are the kind of things I'm looking for. Are they able to track along as the teacher is reading? Can they track along where the teacher is at? Again, that's a task that we're looking at, how well they can follow along. I just did one for a student, and I have the Easy Readers that come in the blue, the green, the orange, all sorts of colors. And I noticed that he kept flipping his words. But I noticed it when he was writing, he would flip the letters like inside the word, like read would be R-A-E-D, and he'd just flip it, but not know that he flipped it. So he'd still call it his read. So I gave him one of those to do it with, and he started not making any mistakes. And what happened, what I found out when I was talking to, again, the team, the resource specialist was there, she goes, you know what, we have him highlight in yellow, and his favorite color for reading was yellow. So I'm like, well, you know what, he needs this, like for even just copying tasks, he had a hard time being able to see the words unless we had them highlighted in yellow. So it was like the yellow and the orange colors were what worked for him. Blue, green did not make a difference, but it made such a difference, just something little, low tech like that made a difference for him. Okay. And then there's the reading pen, and the reading pen, I like to use it just like for reading small excerpts of worksheets or like a test. And it only reads print, so you can't write in handwriting and expect it to read for you. The talking dictionary is another one where they could just enter a word to try to hear what it's talking about or what the meaning is. Another one that I use a lot of is symbols to text. I use Boardmaker Online where you can, it has the symbols and words and different activities and readings. There's so many out there that teachers have created and other specialists have created. Clicker is another big one. PixWriter, I use that on my laptop. Clicker is one. I provide basically a word wall, and you can color code those word walls. So like if you're teaching your pronouns or your nouns are yellow, and your verbs, there's what's come next in the sentence, and those would be green, to help teach them to build those sentences, sentence building kind of stuff. Those are some other ideas. Symbol support and writing symbols or SymWriter are also symbol support for reading accommodations. Okay, and then we have our high tech, and with the high tech, again, it requires more training. It's a lot more higher tech. Usually involves iPads, a big electronic device. But some ideas for this would be Bookshare is one that would students who qualify for Bookshare either have to have a specific learning disability such as dyslexia, or they have a physical disability, cerebral palsy, something like that, or a visual disability where they can't see printed words. That's what would qualify for somebody for Bookshare. And if not, I think there's like a $50 payment that a parent can make if they want their child to get into Bookshare. Learning Ally is another place that offers books, electronic books. And I'm sorry, that's what Bookshare does too. I apologize, didn't say that exactly. Bookshare offers like textbooks and stuff in an alternative format so that it can read it, electronically if you need to have something read out loud. Same thing with Learning Ally. Learning Ally provides more human narrator than Bookshare. Bookshare does all synthetic speech or computerized speech. Learning Allies does offer a lot more in the human narrator. So if you have a student who prefers more of the human voice rather than that text-to-speech voice, then that might be the way to go. Kurzweil, Voice Stream Reader, those are some apps that I use. Read and Write as well are some things that we use to read back, scan in worksheets you can scan in, have it attached to your Google Drive or to Dropbox, and it reads back, and sometimes I'll have parents or teachers send the notes stuff to them so that it can read back to them what it is they're missing in class. Or if they need to take a test, or if they're writing up something and they need to do some editing of their own written work, these would be some things that I would work on with them. So, so as an example, one of my students that I work with does use Voice Stream Reader, and she uses Voice Stream Reader with Bookshare, and she also uses Voice Stream Reader with her Google Drive. And in the document she uses, this is an example, she highlights the document. So sometimes she doesn't know what all the words mean, and she needs to have those words read back. And, with Voice Stream, we can highlight the words by just, touching your finger and highlighting the word, and you can get the notes, or you can get the definition, and she puts that into her notes and then exports that out into her Google Drive. So she makes a collection of all these highlighted words and exports into her Google Drive so she can follow that later and kind of review what it was those words meant later on. So that's one example. Another one is, I didn't put it up there, but another example would be, Snap and Read, which does dynamic text leveling. So like if you have a person or a student that is in 10th grade or 7th grade and reads at 3rd grade level, but is receiving 7th grade material, how can we dynamic level that text so that they're getting it at the level they need it, but still being provided what the rest of the class is doing? And Snap and Read is one that does do a great job with dynamic text leveling, and it does it on the internet. It does it on the different Google Chrome, Drive, that kind of thing. So Snap and Read is one, and then Rewordify is another good one that we've used, where you just copy and paste your text, and it changes the meaning of it to a much simpler format. But again, they're being offered the same curriculum that the rest of their peers are offered, just with those accommodations, that technology to help. Okay, so now we're going to talk about writing really quick. So I shake myself to stop daydreaming. Writing is definitely the worst task of all. It was just way too hard to remember all the things I need, like periods and capital letters. And then it's almost impossible to think about how to spell words when I'm busy trying to think about the story. It's so hard to remember what I'm writing about. And that's Eli Richards from The Boy Who Hated to Write, Understanding Dysgraphia on page 36. So again, when we're looking at writing is a huge process where you have to be able to listen, interpret that, and write it down into letters and capital letters and punctuation. So it's such a huge process. So what are some environments that we're looking at? Again, when we're looking at the student, it's how many classrooms is he having to write this in? How close is he to the board? How are they able to copy the text that is next to them? And then, does he need this, the symbols to go with it to understand the written work as well? So we look at the different environments that he's needing to do the written task. And some of those, and some of what's next is the task that we look at for writing. Again, is he able to copy notes from the board? Is he able to copy near point copying? And then how accurate is he in copying that? And then how fast is he in copying that? And then again, with the environments, if they are going to use technology, do they have access to the computer in every environment that they're having to use the technology? So if you have a middle schooler, they're going to different classes, or a high schooler, they're going into different classes. And I know a lot of times too is our kids don't want to look different than what everybody else is doing. And so we want to take into account what kind of technology does the classroom use, or do other kids use in the school, so that it doesn't look different. So we look at the different tasks. Are they able to fill in the blanks? Do they need technology for that? Are they able to circle the letters if doing multiple choice? And maybe tests need to be just offered for multiple choice, or true and false. So those are some of the tasks we're looking at for writing. And again, some of the tools, like low-tech tools, those are just the writing grips. There's a variety of writing grips. I'm sure you've experienced your share of those. That they put on the picture to make, or pencil to make it a little bigger so they can write better. Do they do better on a slant board? Writing templates, word walls, and then I'll show you a word wall really quick, where they have the words to choose from in order to create their own sentences, so that they're not having to write everything out. The words are there visually for them. They're able to pick it out much quicker than they are able to write it, but they're not losing the content of what's being taught. So sometimes word walls work better for them. A magnetic board or dry erase board, and sometimes that's one thing that some of my students do, depending on the task, is it's just easier to write it on a dry erase than to do it with pencil and paper. And so we'll take a picture of it and send it to the teacher so that they have it documented that they were able to answer those questions. Or I've had it where some teachers, everybody gets a dry erase board and they're all working on it together, and when they get the answers right, they all hold it up so nobody's singled out. So using some of those low-tech devices or low-tech strategies in the area of writing. Okay. And then another idea is for mid-tech. I have it's called a Fusion Writer, a Fusion keyboard, and I don't have it up there, a picture of it. But again, it's a very portable keyboard, and it might be simpler than using a whole laptop or iPad. Not as much training, not a lot of choices in it, so they're able to attend to the task on hand. Using a labeler to label things rather than having to type everything out. A smart pen, there's one right down here. Smart pen kind of takes the whole writing process out of the equation, especially in the area of writing notes. I've used it a lot for our students that need to write notes. And so what they'll do, and I kind of give them strategies of, okay, if you hear the word test, this is important for the test, just make a T and you record it. That way you're able to listen to it and you're not stressed at trying to get all that information, that verbal information, into a written format. You know, just mark test and you have it already recording on here, and then you can go back and listen to it later. It kind of takes out that writing, the stress and the anxiety that comes with that. There's voice recognition on the iPad, but again, you got to consider the environments. How well are they going to be able to recognize in the loud environments that usually go in the classroom? Word prediction is a big help, especially when it comes in the area of spelling. I can't say that it really helps increase the rate that you keyboard, but it does help increase the accuracy for spelling words. And so this is an example. So if I have a student that writes more phonetically, then this is an example of one of the word prediction programs. So it will word predict, but it also will grammar predict as well. So when they do the word right and spell it with an R, it predicts correctly the right word. And if they're not sure, do they need the auditory feedback to find the correct word so they know they're getting the correct spelling? But then it'll also predict the correct grammar that comes after you say these certain words or spell these certain words. Okay. And then the other thing is alternative keyboards. That's okay. Or sometimes we have to use, key guards to help somebody with accuracy when they're having to touch keyboards on. Say this one's for an iPad Air. It's just for the QWERTY keyboard. And I have an example on the next slide of a couple of different examples. So this is what I meant by the word walls. So this was my students writing, just filling out a blank and trying to come up with a sentence on its own. And it took a long time. There were behaviors. It was a little hard. It was really hard. And it took a lot of time out of the day of just writing something. But even though he wrote it, it wasn't very legible. It was off the line. So some things that I did was I provided him, and for him, he was very motivated with technology. And so we used the iPad for him in the classroom. So what I did was I used Clicker Connect set and made a simple one for a banana. And then with those words, he was able to give me so much more than what he could do with writing. And then on the next slide, this is another example. We used SnapType Pro for him, where we just snapped a picture of the worksheet, and he was able to touch it and then type in the word, rather than trying to write the answers and the blanks provided. Because again, he couldn't write into the small lines. So what's another way we can help you with that? And then we can adjust the font. There's the slider up there, the white button up there. You just slide it up and down to make the font as big or as small as he needs it to. So again, it decreased the amount of frustration, and we got the product out much more efficiently. Okay. And then when I'm talking about alternative keyboards, and again, the student that I was working with, very slow with the QWERTY keyboard, and I'm sure you know what I mean by QWERTY, the standard QWERTY keyboard. Not had much experience with keyboarding, but yet he needed it to help get out the written product better. And so I provided him with an ABC layout. And with the ABC layout, I cannot use it. But when he does, he knows exactly where all those letters, because he's used to it. He knows his ABC, so it's very familiar to him. And that was his preference. And when I do technology, I usually ask my students, after every trial that we do, how would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 4? We use the Likert scale. 1 being you hate it, 4 being you love it. How do you feel about this? Because I don't want technology to be abandoned later. So we provide it and then they just don't use it because they don't like it. So they have to have a say in this too. And so, for him, this was definitely a 4 because it was much easier for him. I wouldn't not find it easy, but he did. This was an example of read and write for Google. So this boy's in the 10th grade, and he uses read and write. He uses Bookshare, and then we send it. Actually, I break down his chapters and I email him his chapters. I share it with him on his Google Drive, so he doesn't have one big book that's being read by Google Chrome. So we break it down, and actually he uses the read and write software on Google Chrome to read back his work for him. And then he also makes notes, and you see how we have the word prediction up there. So he uses the word prediction. He also uses the highlight feature, which is right at the very top where you have all the different colors. He uses that highlight feature to, again, highlight specific words, and then he sends that to his Google Drive so he can look at it later. It creates a vocabulary list for him. Okay. And this is in Jaden. He uses CodeWriter Universal. So he uses CodeWriter on his MacBook. He uses it on his Chrome. He uses it on his iPad. It's universal. So no matter what type of technology he's using, he has access to it. And that's one that's becoming more and more available. The CodeWriter Universal, Snap and Read Universal, like one that does the dynamic text leveling, it's becoming more, where regardless of what platform you're using, you can have access to it. And so he uses the Universal, and his quote was that CodeWriter is a great tool that has helped me improve my spelling and writing by a considerable amount. I love how easy it is to use and how you can select the writing topic. The topic dictionary will predict words relevant to what you're writing. And that's, Jaden, he's in the 7th grade. And he does lots of reports, writing reports. And what's nice with CodeWriter, and there's some other ones out there that do topic writing, where it just imports the words, so the vocabulary words that are important to that specific topic. So if he's writing on volcanoes, he'll type in the topic for volcanoes, and it predicts those words that are based on volcanoes. So he's not predicting words that are relevant to what he's working on. So, and then organization, executive functioning. Often when we think of problems with executive functioning, we think of disorganization. However, organization is only one of those important skills. And in executive functioning, I've been getting so many more referrals for this area. We look at how a person's able to shift between tasks, how well are they able to attend to the task on hand, organizing their day. What are some things, executive functioning things that we look at? So we look at the environment. And again, in the environment, how many classrooms are they going to have to keep track of? Do they have, like for my daughter, I know they used a portfolio of the journal that they had to write in every day. But it also goes back to the writing. How well do they attend to what's being written up on the board, and are they able to copy that onto their journal? Some ideas that we use or the tasks that we use for some of these might include highlighters. So we might highlight portions, or I do color coding. So if you have math, it's going to be a certain color. If you have science, it's a certain color. So it all goes into one binder, and how can we divide that up so it makes more sense to them? I know a lot of kids have issues with what do I throw away, what do I keep? And so sometimes it's just taking that time. And again, it's with the organization, you have to kind of practice. It has to become a habit in order to form those executive functioning skills. So I might do tabs, dividers, or digitally record things so that they can remember it later. Visual schedules, and I already talked about color coding folders, are some ideas for low-tech organization. And then some mid-tech stuff that we do, you can go ahead and, thank you. We use graphic organizers. I really like Inspiration. I actually like the Inspiration on the iPad a little easier than on the laptop, the software. but we use it a lot. It uses the graphics, it uses pictures, it organizes. You can make flashcards out of it. You can do so much with it. And it provides templates for them to be able to follow along. So like if I have a student who's doing a reading paper or a science paper, a compare and contrast, it's got a lot of that stuff already in there. So I'm not having to develop a wheel. It's already there for them. Just yesterday I was working with a student, and we did a compare and contrast, and he's like, oh no, we did a brainstorming activity just so he could get used to what all of these templates do for him and that inspiration. And he's like, this is just so much easier than me trying to come up with it on my own, because then they get lost in what they're doing. There's no task initiation. And so some of these are some good things to do. But there's a ton of graphic organizers, and you can go online and look for a lot of them that you can just download and print out and work with your students on. Watchminder is one that I've used quite a bit. So with Watchminder, it's just a watch, just right down here. You put it on, and you can set it up to go in increments of 5 minutes to help them to pay attention. So if you have a student that's not paying attention in class, it sets up every 5 minutes. But this is where the task, looking at what task is it that's hard for them to do. And I'm going to use my daughter as an example because we had such a hard time with her paying attention, especially in math. Now, other class, she's fine, but the math was a really hard time for her. And so I'm like, well, let's start it. We set it up for 5 minutes, every 5 minutes, and then we got to the point where it's like 10 minutes we would do. So every 10 minutes it would just vibrate, and then she'd look and it says pay attention. So then she pays attention. The other thing she would forget, and a lot of this goes with executive functioning, forget things. You write it down doesn't mean that it's going to come home. And so, at the end of the day, it would go off at 3:05. It would just buzz. It wouldn't buzz. It would just vibrate, so nobody else heard it. And I had put in exactly what it was she needed to do. Make sure your reading book comes home, or make sure your science book comes home. You have a test tomorrow, those kind of things. And you can program it to say those specific things so that they're not forgetting those things. Or it got to the point she would forget to even write in her planner at the beginning of the day. So yes, there's that strategy of using a planner, using a journal to write those things in. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. And so again, like I use the Watchminder to remind her, write in your planner, 8:05, it's going off, write in your planner. And then now we don't ever use it. She never has to use it. Again, it goes back to where we have to do it like every day to get into that habit, and then it becomes a habit, and then we're not having to focus so much on the technology anymore. So that's just one example. The Ada Reminder or VocalXL, these are reminder apps that are really handy on either iPad or the iPhone, if the kids are allowed to have their iPhone. And one thing I find too, Reminders is one that's built into the iPad. But one thing you need to know, or when we're doing the assessment, is do they need to be able to hear it? Do they need to be able to see it? Because some of us will hear our phone ding and we ignore it and it goes away. Is that what's going to happen to this? Or do they need to actually have the motor plan of like flipping it on to remove it to actually get the reminder that they have to do something? Or the VocalXL, like we could use a picture, we can use a video modeling, any of those things to help them remember what the next step is. Okay. So this is my daughter. So this was her. I feel so frustrated and nobody gets what I'm going through. I just can't remember, and I feel like I'm not as smart as everyone else. So that's how she felt before we started working with the Watchminder and getting her successful with that. And this is another example. I talked about inspiration. This is another one, Tools for Students. This is another really good app that I use. There's Tool for Students and a Tool for Students too. That's really good at the organizers. And they just type in what it is. I can't tell what this one is very well. I think it's like a Venn diagram, it looks like. So one of my students, his comment on using them was, the graphic organizers helped me do my research first. And when it went to do my computer or my paper, my thoughts were down in writing, and it was a much smoother process. So again, it organizes their thoughts, or it gives them organization to how they're going to write that subject, or how they're going to write the paragraph or 5 paragraphs. depending on what it is that they're having to write on. So it just provides that organization much better for them. Okay, so augmentative communication is a whole nother bear. And for each of these topics, we could spend so much time on each one. This is just a quick overview of what some of these tools are and kind of the process of how you get some of these things in your hands or in your kids' hands. So augmentative communication, it's a variety of ways that we communicate. We don't all stick to one way to communicate. We just don't use our voice. I use my hands a lot to talk. We use our eye gaze, our facial expressions, and so I don't want to stick to one thing. And so I work with speech pathologists to try to find what technology might help somebody. And so it's engaging, interactive, it has to be visual, motivational, functional, accessible, and portable. So those are some things that are very important when looking at AAC. Using augmentative communication for any client or student, because if it's not motivational and if it's not easy for them to access, then there won't be success in using it. So in looking ahead we did the person at the different environments, and then if we go ahead to the different tasks, what all will they need to communicate and with who? Again, in the environment, we talk about, the different people that they're communicating with, because communication partners play a big role in learning communication. Because if your communication partner is not going to model that kind of language, then it's not going to be successful either. But also looking at the tasks, what sort of tasks are identified that they need to communicate. We have some that can communicate really well through gestures and pointing that they want something, a request, but yet they can't comment on something. They can't use a negation with no, I don't want it, I don't like it. What kind of task is identified? Functional communication is identified for AAC. And then again, the trials of a number of tools. And again, I reiterate, it takes trials of different devices, not one device, because one person works on it here means that the whole class gets to do it. It's all individualized. So trial different tools. Is it word-based? Do they need categories? Do they need just a communication board? I've had some students that are just so into iPads that we can't use iPads as a way to communicate because they don't care anything. They don't see it as a communication tool, but yet they see a communication board like this as a way to communicate very successfully. And some kids just use sign language. So it's trialing a whole bunch of different dedicated devices or iPad apps that are meant for communication, and different, low-tech strategies as well. So this is Clinton, and Clinton has autism and apraxia. He had speech therapy for many years, and he continues to have speech therapy, but remained nonverbal. When assistive technology was introduced, his language began to blossom, and assistive technology permits him to clarify when he is not understood. I firmly believe that without assistive technology, he would have remained nonverbal. I feel very blessed that AT was made available to him, and that's from his mom. Had made that statement. And with Clinton, he's very verbal now, and now he types everything. So he'll send me text messages and stuff like that. But for a long time, he was nonverbal, and it goes back to where people are concerned with AAC not prohibiting somebody from communicating verbally, but actually gives them the auditory reminder or auditory cue of what to say verbally. So, and then this is one from Adam. And Adam actually uses the rapid response method where he touches the keyboard, a handheld keyboard. And, but the thing is he would only do it with his mom. And so we started him on using protocol for text, and now he communicates very well using the keyboard on the iPad. And so he says, I would love with all my heart, and it would change my life. I am grateful. So he uses that protocol for text as a method to communicate, because he's primarily texting or writing. Okay, so for a review, a good AT assessment starts by asking all the right questions. What's the environment? What can the student do? What's motivating to them? And then, that's not just all the questions, but some. And then the more that the team understands about the interaction between the person, the task, the activity they have a difficulty with, and the environment or context in which they perform that task, the better equipped we are to identify tools to help them in this desired outcome. An assessment is a collaborative approach by a team and not just a one-time event or one person. So, and in searching for the tools, focus on the features of the assistive technology that the student needs. And I know sometimes teams get so caught up in using just the assistive tech, what's the technology, what's the device, that they forget to include services. And in those services comes, training for family, training for the student, training for the teachers, the team that's involved with them. And then how much support will that student need throughout that school year. So don't forget to include services that go with the technology. And then the assessment should include trials of varying tools to determine the effectiveness. Like I said earlier, I also have my student tell me, give me some idea how you feel about this compared to this, so that I know that I'm matching what it is that they feel will help them the most. And then based on those trials, the team should write specific technology into that IEP for the student. So, and then at the conclusion, at the end, I have some resource banks. The California Tech Act, Closing the Gap really focuses a lot on technology and education. And you can go on their website, and there's a lot of webinars as well that you can access from there. I didn't include ATIA, but ATIA is another one that has webinars that you can access. GPAT, ETSTAR, all of these are great. The WADI is what I was kind of referring to, includes the team looking at the student environment, the tasks, and those specific areas, reading, math, studying, tools, learning, those kind of things.
If you enjoyed this episode of Aspire Talks, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this talk, feel free to comment on our Facebook page or visit our website at aspirespeech.com. Thank you for watching.